Hi guys, my name is Emily, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Stand by Stephen King. So I've been reading the physical book and alternating with the audiobook, which was narrated by Grover Gardner. The narrator of the audiobook has kind of a very raspy voice, very dry voice, and he read so slowly. I sped it up to, I think, double speed, just because it was so painfully slow to listen to. I'm not sure if I would recommend the audiobook, but I mean, it is a nice alternative because this book is so long, just to kind of, if you're tired, to check in and listen. The Stand starts off with a massive plague. So the plague kills the majority of the people on the earth, or at least the majority of the people in the United States. I can't remember, it probably does affect everybody in the world. There are just a bunch of random leftover people coming together and they're having these weird dreams. And this is a book that really blurs the lines between, I guess, a post-apocalyptic dystopian novel and a fantasy novel because of the magical elements. I'm almost tempted to classify this as a fantasy over a horror novel, just because the amount of horror in it is very minimal. So I really liked the multiple perspectives. I liked that we flipped between different characters, the good guys and the bad guys. I liked the magical elements, the sort of fantastical elements, which we are supposed to take as real, this kind of magic that exists on the limits of the world and becomes very relevant once most of the people survive this plague, seem to have this touch of magic or an awareness of magic. What I didn't like, personally, is the plague stuff. I'm a bit of a germaphobe. I have real issues with sickness. It's just something that grosses me right out. And the first part of this book was almost painful to read. Like, sitting there and just reading these graphic descriptions of people oozing stuff. I was almost ready to put it down. I was like, if this is the whole fucking book, I can't do this. So if you're also in the sick is awful boat, stick with it and you will eventually get to books 2 and 3. Actually, the whole plot of the book has very little to do with the sickness, and that's one of my complaints. I feel like this book is bloated. This is a huge novel, and I almost feel like it doesn't need to be this big. I did spend 6 months reading this book, so checking in with these characters, kind of settling in with these characters with something so big, I felt very invested in all of the characters, and I think part of that has to do with some of the excess shit in there that on the one hand weights down the book, but on the other hand really makes you believe that these characters are real. But I can definitely see that in terms of plot, driving the plot, it's too long. It is way too long. Like a whole book devoted to the plague that really doesn't even matter. So those are my unspoilery thoughts on The Stand, and I'm going to go on and talk about some spoilery things. So, the spoilers. What are Stephen King's politics? I really need to read something about Stephen King's biography. I realized this was written in the 80s. He's quite young. I'm sure he's evolved as a human. There were a lot of things in here that are just super racist, super sexist, super homophobic. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be indicative of America at the time. Is it really supposed to be the dirty, nitty-gritty American reality in the 80s? Because this was published in 1978 and then I think re-released in 1990. So like the gap in between there, it's 80s, 90s, right? So AIDS is a big issue, so we have this plague. Is it a byproduct of like the AIDS panic? A lot of things, like a lot of like zombie stuff was produced in the AIDS era. It became the societal preoccupation with the passing of disease and the passing of dis-ease, like discomfort. With the apocalypse, this kind of fits in with the AIDS apocalypse zombie stuff that's happening, at least in the beginning, but then it devolves into fantasy. Yeah, I'm really not sure what to do with just some of the ugliness in this book. The eventual quest we get to stop Randall Flagg, it's a team of 4 men that goes. Franny is not allowed to go. And I also had a bit of an issue with Tom Cullen and Trash Can Man, like the language used around them, and I'm not sure if it's a temporal thing, like if it's the language of the time and people would use words like retarded. I hate that word. I really hate that word. And that's why I'm wondering about King's politics. Does King still use the word retarded? Like, is he still sort of conservative in that way? Or is that the word of the time and now King wouldn't use that? So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the magic and how this is really more of a fantasy novel. So initially the magic is sort of liminal, but then once the plague happens, the magic is immersive. I'm almost trying to decide if this is a high fantasy or a low fantasy because the magic plays a huge part. The magic draws everyone together. The magic guides the characters' actions. Like in Game of Thrones is a low fantasy because the magic is sort of peripheral. I always think of Stephen King as horror, but this really got me to think about how horror as a genre is very closely related to the fantastic. I'm almost picturing the larger fantasy genre as like a braid, and you see horror as a separate strand that occasionally gets woven back in, and I feel like this is one of those places where the sort of horrific plague aspects, the dystopian aspects, end up braided back into the fantastic. I really don't know what to do with this in terms of genre. This honestly wasn't what I was expecting from The Stand. I found the ending almost a bit of a letdown and a little bit too long. I don't know what you guys thought of the ending. So the confrontation between Randall Flagg and Larry and Ralph was kind of anticlimactic. Trashy comes in with the radioactive stuff and it explodes, and like that's the end of it, and then it becomes Stu Redman's journey back with Tom Cullen. I don't think we needed the return journey. I do like that Randall Flagg makes an appearance right at the end again. He's never gone. The idea that you can never eliminate what is truly wrong in the world, that it will always reemerge. If the good guys exist, they're kind of reforming a society, but there's the idea that with forming civilization, you will recreate all of the evils. Humans are innately flawed. I guess that kind of subverts the happy fantasy ending. The return to the sort of utopic, untouched good place is tainted with evil just by nature of humans being greedy and selfish. I don't know. I'm left with a lot of questions. I'm unsure whether or not I like or dislike this book. I'm not sure if I would ever read it again. I might listen to it on audiobook again. Those are my thoughts on The Stand. Let me know what you guys think. If you've read anything about King's personal politics, like any articles or interviews, or if you have a really good biography recommendation, I would love to read more about King as a human being. And I know generally you're not supposed to let the biography of the author influence your view of the work, but I'm honestly curious. So if you have any resources for me, leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you think of The Stand, of the genre. What genre would you place The Stand in? Let me know what you think about the bloatedness of this book. Did you enjoy it or did you find it annoying? I look forward to chatting with you guys in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!